This is a man called Carl Borg-Neal, and he was one of around 100 senior Lloyds managers who were asked to participate in a training session that was online back in July 2021. Everything was online then, wasn't it? And it was entitled, wait for it, Race Education for Line Managers. Provided by an external organisation, it formed part of the bank's Race Action Plan, launched in the wake of George Floyd's death the previous year. So I think we can already have deep sighs around this already. He'd worked for Lloyds for 27 years without incident. He was popular among colleagues, and he'd risen to be promoted again and again to a managerial role at head office. He'd recently joined a new scheme mentoring young colleagues from ethnic minority backgrounds, was working with 3 mentees, one from African descent, one of Asian descent, and one of European, non-UK descent. A hard-working, well-respected, well-liked, good bloke with no history of anything that anyone would describe as racism or racist behaviour. And then he attended this session online without saying the actual word that he said, but he did say the full word. Tell us what it is that he did that led to him ending up in an employment tribunal.
Carl had gone into this session with good intentions, absolutely committed, as you've just said, to making sure that Lloyds was an inclusive workplace where people from different ethnic backgrounds felt welcome and tolerated. So he went into this session in that spirit. There was then a conversation because he wanted to ask a question about how he should manage, as a manager, conversations in which employees from ethnic minorities use terms to refer to themselves that would be offensive if white people used exactly the same terms. Now, the trainer was sort of dumbfounded by this and said, what do you mean? And so he gave the example of black employees referring to themselves using the N-word. Now, unfortunately for Carl, he used the word in full. He did not say the N-word, as I've just said.
Wasn't that after
he said it in full.
because the person carrying out the course was saying, sorry, what did you say? And then he said the full word.
Yeah.
Which we don't say on air because it is an offensive word.
Yeah. Yeah. And this isn't about defending the right of people to go into work and be horrendously racist. No. Carl isn't racist. He's the absolute opposite.
He didn't call somebody, he didn't refer to black people as the N-word. He didn't say to a black colleague or client, call them the N-word. He was asking, but what do I do if, when we talk about, what is correct language, if someone who I work with uses the N-word who is black, what's the reaction to that? What do I do? That is a perfectly legitimate question. What happened?
Absolutely right. And he was worried about dealing with that situation. He'd been told at the start of the session, by the way, that this is basically a safe space where people should be free to make mistakes and use clumsy language, let 100 flowers bloom, etc., etc. So he took that somewhat naively on trust and thought that that would be the case. So he asked this question. Unfortunately, he used the word in full. The trainer then absolutely berated him in front of his 100 other colleagues. He attempted to apologize. He realized immediately that was a word that he shouldn't have said and that he didn't want to say. The other point that's worth stressing here is that one of the side effects of Carl's dyslexia is that sometimes he stumbles over his words when he's speaking. Sometimes he expresses himself inarticulately or speaks before having completed the thought process about what he wants to say. So this was a significant factor in why he used the word in full. And that's something that the Employment Tribunal has entirely accepted.
Yeah, but he was berated by the person running the course. Other people on the course actually spoke up and said, but he wasn't doing anything wrong. All credit to people actually doing that. He was branded a racist. Basically, he was facing the sack. He contacted, thank goodness, the Free Speech Union, got a top lawyer on. He's been awarded £800,000. Now, there's some dispute about how much it's actually going to be in the end, but this is including damage, past loss of earnings, future loss of earnings, pensions award, compensation for discrimination, aggravated damages, and compensation for personal injury. But it's well in excess of, by a very factor of the sort of awards people get. But what I don't understand is how this could even have come to a tribunal and come to the point of being sacked when other people there were quite clear about the context. And this is the issue, isn't it? It wasn't about what was in his heart. It wasn't about his intention. It was about someone going, I heard the N-word. It wasn't a black person saying it, so they must be a horrible human being, which is ridiculous because they wouldn't have had that view if he had been black.
And following the training session, the trainer then said that she was so distressed by hearing this word being spoken aloud, even in this context, that she had to take leave for 5 days.
Of course she did.
And then following that period, then made a complaint, which is
Was she paid for those 5 days? I bet she was. I bet she wouldn't have been distressed if she wasn't paid for this. But this is the thing. This is, I mean, we know, you know, being called a racist is now, you know, one of the worst things you can call people. I get called it all the time on social media for expressing completely, I mean, blatantly unracist views. It's quite bizarre. It's a word that is thrown around, and we need to have more people like standing up on this one. Good for him for taking the case, but why do you think this case even came to a tribunal?
I think in 2021, there was just this terrible panic still among managers of all sorts of organizations following George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, etc. And as soon as they heard mention of this word, I think there must have just been a panic and a sense that, well, it's just going to be easier to get rid of this guy, even though he's been with us for 27 years, complete unblemished record, well-respected colleague and all the rest of it. It's just easier to get rid of him. Now, of course, it hasn't been. The damages are going to be in excess of £800,000. The board of Lloyds have been told by the Employment Tribunal to read and study the ruling to make sure that nothing like this can happen again. But one other point I'd make is just that this is only possible because the Free Speech Union and its members are in a position to say, when somebody contacts us at their lowest ebb, like Carl did, and said, look, I've just been dismissed, there's no hope of me rebuilding my career, my life is in tatters, we can say, well, we can take this risk of fighting this legal battle for you. We can cover the legal fees of £150,000 because of our members, because we have supporters who are willing to put their money where their mouth is and defend freedom of speech in the UK. And because of that, we're able to take the risk for him, and he's won. It's an absolute triumph. And in Employment Tribunal terms, £800,000, anything north of that, is a gigantic sum of money, far beyond the typical sort of awards that you would see because of the egregiousness of what happened to Carl.